Is government not able to handle the fiscal stress? Why has the government decided to change the fiscal rules? And where are the cuts being made and concerns being caused for ensuring fiscal responsibility? Union budget of year 2026-27 has not only changed numbers, it has also changed that how government will look at borrowing and also manage it, from fiscal deficit to debt to GDP ratio. Hello everyone, welcome to Vajram and Ravi's Flash News. My name is Shubhangi Singh, and in today's session we will be understanding that why this particular fiscal rule has been changed, what are the changes, we will be understanding those concepts and also try to understand that what government is trying to make of it. So let us begin with understanding that what exactly has been done in this budget. So Union Budget 2026-27 has brought out a new framework for fiscal policy, and in this the whole borrowing concept will be shifted from fiscal deficit targeting to debt GDP ratio targeting. Now let us try to understand this. Now whenever we are talking about fiscal deficit, how do we look at fiscal deficit? We look at fiscal deficit as a situation when, let's just say, government's total expenditure, this has gone beyond their total earning, correct? But in this scenario, what do? We exclude the borrowing. We keep the borrowing on one side. So let's just say if your salary is 1 lakh rupees, that means your total earning will be 1 lakh rupees. And what is your expenditure? Let's just say in this particular month, because you are planning a trip, your expenditure went above 1 lakh, it is 1,10,000. So in this context, that means you are short of 10,000, correct? So that is what is exactly indicated by fiscal deficit. But let's just say if we include borrowing, so your salary is of 1 lakh, you decided to borrow from your friends 20k and your total expenditure is only of 110, then that means you are not in fiscal deficit situation. Now when the government is saying that they want to move away from fiscal deficit targeting to debt to GDP ratio targeting, what does this mean? As I said, your monthly income is 1 lakh rupees. So let's just assume you decide, okay, I will make sure that my borrowing is not going to be more than 10,000 rupees. You have decided that? That means you are targeting a specific number that, okay, even in a worst case scenario, I will be borrowing only 10,000 rupees. My borrowing will not go beyond this number, okay? But one time you decide, okay, let's just say your salary has been revised from 1 lakh rupees to 2 lakh rupees. You understand, okay, my salary has changed. I'm not going to borrow more than 10,000, but I can do it on the basis of percentage. So let's just say if you are earning 2 lakh rupees, you say, I am not going to borrow more than 5% of my salary. So this is the difference that the government has made. Here GDP is the amount that is being earned, imagine that, and debt is the borrowing that you are doing. So in this context, what government is saying? We will be deciding that how much we want to borrow will be very closely related to what GDP is looking like. And the whole idea to do this here is to ensure that whatever the government is borrowing, that is sustainable, that does not allow an economic breakdown like situation, and it also leaves them with some sort of flexibility in terms of finances. Now when we are talking about this particular change, this also allows that fiscal consolidation, that means the borrowing that government has done in order to consolidate that also continues and adjustment around it happens. But the problem that has emerged around it that is easily noticeable in terms of expenditure is that the adjustment burden is falling unevenly. How? When we were talking about this less number, do you remember? Your salary is 1 lakh, but you need to spend 1,10,000 this month because you are planning the trip. Now you have decided you will only borrow 10,000. And if the trip goes up to 1,20,000, then because you have decided you will only borrow 10,000, what you will do? You will try to cut down your regular expenditures. You will try to make sure that you save from food or going out or not spending on other luxuries. So similarly, when the government is making these adjustments, these adjustments are coming out unevenly. So this whole change has raised a debate that yes, we want fiscal discipline, but at the same time we also have to look into ensuring growth, because government expenditure is important for growth stimulus, and if this compromises this, how we will manage. But at the same time, if we are talking about government expenditure, it should also ensure equity. So all these needs to be balanced, and how it can be balanced. Now in this context, once you have understood that what exactly government has changed in the policy, now let us move ahead and look into other things, such as what exactly are fiscal rules and why do they matter. When we are talking about borrowing, it is understood by fiscal rules only. Like you made a rule that I will not borrow more than 10,000 rupees. So similarly, the government also makes rules that okay, this is the limit that we are going to have, not just in terms of borrowing also, but also in terms of spending, so that the economy overall and the macroeconomic indicators, they remain stable and strong. The investors feel okay, whenever you are looking at a company for investment, let's just say, and you are seeing that they have borrowed a lot and they have no cap on spending, that means they are unsustainable in the long term. Similarly, if an investor is interested in investing in our country, and if they find our borrowing is high, spending is high, that means we are unsustainable. So they don't want that. They want to enhance investor confidence. That is why they are putting fiscal rules themselves. And overall, you don't want, as an individual, you don't want to keep borrowing money in a manner that in the end you are not able to repay it at all, or you want to borrow an amount that you can evenly pay out without causing much harm to yourself. So same the government is trying to do. And if we look at over the years, that how the deficit has grown over the years, you will be able to clearly see that especially after 2020, the change, the increase has been huge. So till this time, India used to follow only the sound finance approach. That means their only emphasis was on deficit reduction. That means, okay, if we are falling short of 20 lakh rupees, if we are falling short of 20,000 rupees, we need to reduce it to 15,000, we need to reduce it to 10,000, we need to reduce it to 5,000. And they also had a very limited role for counter-cyclical fiscal policy. That means when we are talking about cycles, business cycles, what will happen across the cycles, very limited role was present. So in this context, this sound finance approach was used traditionally. And we have to remember, when you are talking about fiscal rules, they not only impact government's fiscal deficit, they also impact that how much government is going to spend, how much of that spending will be used for welfare, and how much of that spending will be used for growth. So fiscal rules are an important factor not just for the government but also for the economy in itself. And this is where we get to see that government decided to change it. The whole framework which was earlier embedded in FRBM Act, now as per that, the whole idea was fiscal deficit. So the target debt to GDP ratio was kept 40%, and if there was any downturn, that means if the cycle, down cycle is seen, if we are talking about recession, in such times flexibility was very much limited, that was given by FRBM. But in this context, when we are talking about this new framework, they are not talking about fiscal deficit to GDP ratio, they have moved towards debt to GDP ratio. And they have decided to reduce it by 50% by 2031. That means in next 5 years, the debt will be reduced by 50%. So that means there will be increased debt tolerance also for the government. They will be able to get more debt if required, and they will also have a longer adjustment period to ensure that this is delivered easily. Furthermore, this whole structural shift has been done to ensure betterment in fiscal governance, not just flip the numbers, not just flip in the numbers. Now let us see that what this new framework basically does to the deficits that have been present. As of now, we will see the deficit targets that were in place, the fiscal consolidation on them will continue. Now, if you look at fiscal deficit for the financial year 2026, 4.4, and if you talk about the budget estimates that have been presented, that is targeted at 4.3%. So, this consolidation you can see continuing. If you talk about similarly primary deficit, can you give me the equation for primary deficit in the comment section? So, if you are talking about if you are talking about last financial year 0.8%, the budget estimates of this year 0.7%. Furthermore, this clearly shows that the government will focus and continue deficit reduction, and this is very similar that we saw just after COVID, especially when we are talking about financial year 2022 period, and it clearly also indicates that here the whole idea that we want to have stability. The expenditure the government does not want to go towards so much expenditure that they have to compromise on stability, especially in the time where we are seeing extreme global chaos. So, this is what deficits will get to see. How this will impact fiscal consolidation? Now, when we are talking about fiscal consolidation, there is a huge constraint on revenue. When we are talking about fiscal deficit, it is not only happening because of increased expenditure, it is also happening because the revenue is limited. So, in this context, revenue needs to be addressed as well. So, for that, if we are looking at non-debt receipts, that means any receipt that is not generating any kind of liability, that has fallen from 9.5% to 9.3%. And this is related to decline in GST because GST tax reforms have been brought in, changes in indirect taxes, and this shows that there is weak demand condition also. As a result, government is trying to adjust with expenditure compression. Now, because government is not getting more income, they have to reduce their expenditure. So, in order to focus on fiscal consolidation, the revenue, because it is not increasing, we are going to reduce the expenditure. How we are going to reduce the expenditure? Now, let us see that. So, when we are talking about last financial year, we get to see the total expenditure as compared to GDP was 13.9%, and what we are aiming this year is 13.6%. That means, that shows that we are reducing here, and if we are looking at this number, this reduction, we have to be very clear that capital expenditure is not being compromised. 3.1% of GDP, it remains there. Revenue expenditure, government is trying to make a major adjustment there. So, that means this is what government is trying to do. But when you look at this, it might seem like you are focusing on growth, you are reducing your regular expenditure, but this has multiplier effect. For example, if government is, let's just take an example, government is reducing in terms of salary. So, if the salary will be reduced, the demand in the economy will be reduced. So, that needs to be kept in mind, because this might seem like a growth friendly idea, but in uneven impact might be seen in real time numbers. Another thing that you can see from the numbers is also that the burden of this adjustment will also be uneven, because the development expenditure is going to decline. For example, when we are looking at development expenditure as per GDP, 6.1% for this year, declined 5.7%. The allocation for rural and agriculture 1.5%, 1.2%. That means there is a sharp cut in rural development, agricultural development, and also rural employment. That means this will lead to weakened rural demand, and it will also neutralize tax based demand stimulus that was given last year. So, when we are trying to focus on fiscal consolidation, this factor, that is this number that we are showing, that might lead to a problem, and it might have an uneven impact that needs to be considered. And that is why two major concerns have been raised. Concern one, that government does not need to do this, government needs to focus on investment revival, that is much needed. Second concern, that it raises is how it impacts our primary sector and our primary base of the economy. Now, what are your thoughts on this? What are the concerns that you think that the change in fiscal policy and the cut in development expenditure might lead to? Let me know in the comment section. I'll be leaving you here with a practice question. You can put down your answers in the comment section. Thank you so much.